I'm a 35-year employee of the National Park Service. I came here in 1980 expecting to do my 3 years in Washington. So much for that plan. But it's been a great, great career here in Washington, D.C. I've worked at most of the parks inside the Beltway, a few of the parks outside the Beltway, places like the Kennedy Center, the National Mall, helped in the development of the Holocaust Museum. So it's been a really exciting career. This is my second time at the Parkway. I was the deputy superintendent from 1995 to 2003. And it was a real delight to be able to, what I characterize as, come home. This is my favorite park in the National Capital area because of the diversity of its resources. And let me tell you about a few of those resources if you are not familiar with our boundary. We are in both Maryland and Virginia. In Maryland, we have the Clara Barton Parkway, as well as Glen Echo Park and Clara Barton National Historical Site. Glen Echo Park is an interesting park in that it has a very long history, first as a Chautauqua site associated with Clara Barton, then morphing into an amusement park, and then, of course, was one of the first strikes for civil rights in this area, with the park finally being open to everyone. So it has a rich, rich history. On the Virginia side, we have Great Falls Park, Virginia, and then extending inside the Beltway, the Parkway itself, all the way to Mount Vernon. Included in the Parkway is Roosevelt Island, the TRI Memorial. We also have Arlington House, the Robert E. Lee Memorial, Gravely Point, Dangerfield Island, moving down the Parkway, Dyke Marsh, Bellhaven, Fort Hunt Park, and then the terminus at Mount Vernon. We basically have a lock on the Virginia shoreline inside the Beltway, which is both a curse and a blessing. River access is always an issue, and there's never enough. Which brings up one of the issues that I know you're interested in, is the Arlington Boathouse. We've been working with Arlington County now for over a decade, trying to locate a boathouse to service the county students as well as the citizens. About 5 years ago, thought that we had come to an agreement for what was called the Upper Rosslyn site, which required the county to acquire a piece of property that basically the negotiations fell apart. The county came back to us about 2 years ago and wanted to reopen the study for an Arlington boathouse. And they came to us basically with their preferred alternative, which was to place a boathouse at TR Island on the Virginia shoreline. Well, any of you who understand the federal NEPA process, we can't start out with a preferred alternative. We have to consider all alternatives to any given project. And I think that there was also a lack of understanding on the county's part in terms of what our constraints are and what values we're trying to protect. I think the county was looking at that site as only impacting the parkway and looked at how it could be designed so that it didn't impact the landscape, cultural landscape of the parkway itself. Much more important to us is how it impacts Roosevelt Island as a presidential memorial. And being placed right there smack dab in front of Roosevelt Island, I believe it will be a very lengthy process to examine, and I think that there will be lots of folks who are very interested in how such a structure would impact the island. There are still a lot of questions to be answered about the project, including how it will be used, by whom it will be used, how large it is. But again, it will also have to be considered along with other alternatives, including Dangerfield Island. There's a 14th Street Bridge site, as well as a no-action alternative. I believe in the heat of the final days moving up to the election, Congressman Moran may have given folks the impression that it was a decided project. And I'm here to tell you that the project has just begun. And we will welcome your participation as well as others in trying to make the right solution for both the county as well as this important landscape. Another area that I'm sure you're all interested in is what we call Arlington Ridge Park, which is the setting for the U.S. Marine Corps War Memorial, as well as the Netherlands Carillon. We've been having some activity in that park that's not very welcome. And that has been through, this is not a new phenomena, it tends to be cyclical. We call it visitors behaving badly. That there are activities going on that shouldn't be happening in a public area. I want you to know that we're aware of it. There will be more stricter enforcement. You may not encounter it because it's usually after dark and mostly after midnight. But we are aware of it and we're trying to deal with it. On a more positive note, we're initiating a new Friends group for the memorial, primarily made up of retired Marines. It started with a small area, a small task, which was to replace the flags at the memorial. Some of the Marines noticed that the Marine Corps, who are responsible for replacing the flags, were not doing it with the regularity that they felt was necessary, so they formed their own organization to basically enlist folks to buy flags, fly them for 30 days, and then they get the flag that was flown over the memorial. They've now become a little bit more ambitious and believe that they can take on more in terms of caring for the memorial. We just this week signed an agreement with them, and they will begin forming their group to go into formal fundraising. One of the projects that I'm very hopeful will be accomplished in this effort is to put a comfort station, a permanent comfort station on the grounds. I have to tell you how disgusting I find it that we have those porta-johns there nearly 75 years after the memorial was constructed. And it's also embarrassing to me that it doesn't matter on what schedule we clean them, they're always disgusting. So that certainly is high on my list. It would also allow us to get rid of a sea container that the Marine Corps drags in every year to handle their equipment for the sunset parades, and basically finish out that setting. I don't know if any of you recall or not, but we had been slated to build that comfort station over a decade ago. At the same time, the Air Force Memorial was slated to go into that site. And the Congress, in their wisdom, swept up everything and said, you will not build anything else on this property. We're beyond that now and hope that we can finish this landscape. That literally is the only other proposed change that I would ever see happening in that park. While it remains in what we call Area A of the Memorial Corridor, I just don't see any additional memorials being proposed for that site. I do think that it will always be in jeopardy to being acquired by the cemetery. So that's one of the things that we will continue to have to be vigilant about in terms of trying to keep that setting as it is today. Other things that you might be interested in, we are doing a construction project at Roosevelt Island to rehab the moats on the island. That site also is not always welcoming, especially the moats. It's not unusual to go in there and find some kind of a dead creature floating in the moats, because once they get in, they can't get out. That's one of the things that we'll be fixing, as well as putting in a new filtration system so that we keep down the algae and take out the leaves. So that will be a welcome change there. I don't know if you drive the Parkway very often, but we're right in the middle of a paving job. I would recommend you stay off the Parkway for the next 2 weekends, and we should be done. I was thrilled to be able to get this emergency project. It was unscheduled, so the timing of it was really not within my control. It literally went on the street as soon as it was planned. The winter was so difficult last year that the pavement was literally unraveling. And had we not paved, we likely would have not had a road base left at the end of this winter. So I was very grateful that I was able to get Federal Highway to come in and do a simple mill and overlay so that we do continue to have a road. But I also know that it's a huge inconvenience for those of you who use the Parkway, particularly on the weekends. But Only 2 more weekends, and then you won't have those potholes busting up your tires. We continue to work with Arlington County on what's known as Longbridge Park, the park directly across from Gravelly Point. They're also proposing to do a crossing, another pedestrian crossing of the parkway, which is being considered as a part of the 14th Street Bridge Corridor Plan. Another aspect of the 14th Street Bridge Corridor Plan that, while it's not in Arlington, most people think it is, which is Columbia Island, that's actually in the district, is that we are proposing to build a bridge from Columbia Island to 110 so that we can close the entrance at Columbia Island Marina. We're hopeful that the Pentagon doesn't renege on that agreement, but their perimeter seems to move out every day. Moving down the parkway with the pedestrian crossing that's being proposed for Longbridge Park would be adjacent to the railroad bridges that are just south of the 13th Street Bridge. There are no other significant projects on the parkway other than in Arlington County, but one that you may be interested in Dyke Marsh is that we're currently in the midst of an EIS to consider alternatives for the restoration of Dyke Marsh, which as a wetlands is certainly important to the overall health of both the Potomac River as well as the Chesapeake Bay. And one of the startling facts is that there's 67 acres remaining in the marsh. It was nearly 400 at the turn of the century in 1900. We are losing 3/4 of an acre or 13.6 feet per year, which means that unless we do something, that entire wetland will disappear. So for me, that is perhaps one of my highest priorities in terms of preserving the resources that we have in perpetuity. And I think it has the most significance in terms of how this entire ecosystem will react in the future. And I'm not talking about 5 years, 10 years, I'm talking about 50 to 100 years. I think that, like I said earlier, this is my favorite park because of the diverse resources. Ben and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have about things you've seen us doing and you don't know why, or things that you'd like to see us doing and you don't know why we're not.